Welcome. Oh, good, it's working now. Please have a seat. The most amazing session of the day is about to begin. Who doesn't want to hear about drones? If you are intending to be in the Unlocking Opportunities Market Shaping for Drone Transportation, you're in the right spot. If you're not, stay anyway. It's going to be a lovely session. As we kick off, I would like to introduce the co-facilitator leaders of this panel, Prashant Yadav and Olivier Defa, who will take us away.
Thank you, Deborah. The way we're going to run this session is Olivier will level set us by sharing a few slides and giving us a good preface and context. And then we'll move on to a panel session. We'll introduce the panelists as we go into the session. And so without any more delay, Olivier.
Thank you, Prashant. Oh, I guess I don't need to be there. Thank you, everyone. I know this is the last session, so really appreciate you being here. And listening to about drone and how drone. Here we go. So some of you probably know that for the last decade now, actually a little more, drone has been tested to see if they could be added as an additional mode of transportation into the supply chain. Today, there is plenty of evidence that demonstrate that the addition of drone as an additional mode of transportation, applying the principle of fit-for-purpose, use of fit-for-purpose mode of transportation, is actually beneficial. And also, today, the technology is really starting to explode. Like the variety as well as the capacity of the drone. You probably think drone is small volume, small weight, but now there is literally drone that can carry 100 kilo for 300 kilometer range, or even more, 300 kilo for over 2,000 kilometer. And those are actually flying today. They're actually approved by some civil aviation in Europe, and they are flying days in, days out, just getting the flight hour up. So when you think about drone into your supply chain, you should see drone as a new option that may help your company, may help the public health sector and its supply chain to be more efficient. We know that we are among logisticians here. We know that for cost efficiency, we need to be at scale. The same applies for drone. It doesn't matter the mode of transportation. Scale goes with cost effectiveness. And same thing with utilization. This is some data that has been generated in the GRC. And you can see at the bottom here, we have an asset utilization of 13%. The cost effectiveness is only 10. But when you go up into 44 utilization, the cost effectiveness goes 6.5. Now we're talking. There's many factors that need to be put in place to be able to utilize drone as a mean of transport, as an additional mean of transportation. Today, we're only going to be focusing on the market appetite for this additional mode of transportation. But you have to know that there needs to be regulations, there need to have integration into the supply chain, there is and so on technology, obviously. But today, the purpose of this discussion is around the market appetite. And for the last decade, most of the utilization of drone in logistics has been for the public health sector, because we needed, it was a new technology, needed some good use case with high impact and so on. So that's why it started. But the negative part is that you only have one buyer of the service, one payer who's carrying the whole burden of the cost. To reach scale and to start decreasing the unit cost and to be cost efficient, like I mentioned, we have to shift from a monosectorial market development to a multi-sectorial market development. The drone is agnostic to what you're transporting, so there's no reason that there's all this investment into developing the network just for one type of product, just for public health product. And by diversifying the customers, the user, the buyer of the service, then you're going to start applying different strategy, cost sharing, and market-driven pricing strategy that will benefit the public health, making then drone transport a reality and affordable in a reality today. So today we're going to talk about, so Prashant is going to be leading a discussion with relevant panelists. I mean, we are extremely lucky to have representatives from some of the biggest logistic and supply chain companies, as well as a drone airline. Drone airline is not a drone manufacturer. A drone airline is just like a British Airways who lease or buy a brand of drone, okay? So they do not manufacture. You have Boeing and Airbus, for example. Well, the equivalent, they will have Super Aero or Pika and so on to serve you, to serve the transportation via drone.
Thank you, Olivier. More like an Ethiopian Airlines.
Yes.
Which, as I heard from Shamik yesterday, has demonstrated its agility during the COVID period. So lots of interesting ideas here. I want to start with the preface that drone technology, like Olivier said, has evolved. I count myself amongst people who 10 years ago was very skeptical about what can this technology do. Now I'm asking those questions with a slightly different lens, which are around the kinds of questions that Olivier posed. I think we have a great panel. I want to remind us that any new technology, whether it's logistics technology or other kinds of technology, when it starts and before it becomes mainstream, economies of scale and economies of scope matter a lot, and they are interconnected. Scale economies come when within a particular use case, you start operating at large scale. That is starting to happen with drones in some degree within the health sector, a national scale implementation in Rwanda, in Malawi, in many other places, which is starting to show us that, yes, scale is improving. But scale alone is not sufficient. For an ecosystem to evolve, we need economies of scope. By scope, we mean multiple types of organizations, industries, sectors start using drones. That's what we want to talk about. The market development approach that Olivier talked about essentially focuses on, can we achieve both economies of scale and scope? I want to start with our panel. Here is what I'm going to do. Instead of giving an introduction to each, I'll just say the panelists, and then you can introduce yourself a little bit and your organization. So we'll start with Anthony Wilson, who comes from DSV. Anthony, introduce yourself. I think most people know DSV, but anything else that you would like to tell us about. But my first question to you is, from what you heard, are there drone use cases that DSV is pursuing? Are there areas where you say, whether it's in small parcel delivery, in large parcel delivery, in something else in the value chain, where this is looking attractive to you? And where it is not looking attractive and interesting from a business case standpoint, what do you think are the barriers that are market barriers that are coming in the way? Regulation and other things, of course, are an important area to address, but market barriers. So start with Anthony.
Sure. You know, we only got 45 minutes, eh? So, yeah, thanks very much for having me. We are currently exploring the use of drones specifically in the warehousing environment. We're using them to count stock, specifically high-value stock that is highly pilferable. We've had huge successes with it. We currently have them implemented in South Africa. In terms of the last mile, we're specifically testing when we're supplying spare parts out to wind farms and potentially where we're supplying spare parts to oil rigs, so a lot of offshore. And as the payloads of these drones are improving, that makes the use case a whole lot stronger. But in terms of the local environment, inland type of thing, it's not something that we're currently looking at.
Okay, and we'll come back to you, Anthony, in terms of why aren't you looking at that? What sort of barriers? So we'll come back to that, but let's first go to Emer. So Emer Keegan, she works for DP World, Managing Director of, I will mess this up, but Supply Chain Optimization for the Namibia operations. Emer.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So within DP World, we are not talking about South Africa and regionally, we haven't used it significantly. With Vital Alliance, there's been some discussions, and actually my first introduction to drones was recently with Olivier. But it made me start to think about Namibia and cross-border logistics of where you have a lot of distribution to lodges, which are also in difficult areas to reach. And drones could be a great possibility to get some density of, or scope of product into those areas, and to get some actual density of product into it itself. So it would be a good application. The other thing is courier businesses that do longer distance. So if you take Africa as a huge region, the courier business within areas of just delivering high-value goods would be a good opportunity to review as well. And then, hate to say it, but cigarettes and booze are really good things to put on things. They're high risk from a transport perspective, from a wheels perspective, and it might give you a different network that you want to look at, especially in hotels and lodges, as I've mentioned previously as well.
Superb, Emma. We'll come back in terms of where you're seeing potential and where you are starting to translate that potential into actually starting trials or pilots or programs like that, amongst the many things that you described. So far we've heard use in monitoring, spare part. We've heard some other uses which are in small parcel delivery, courier. We'll go to Michael Merritt next. Michael comes from Skyports, and Olivier introduced the fact that it's like an airline. So tell us more about the organization, and then from Skyport's standpoint, where do you see the drone industry for small to medium-sized cargo parcel delivery evolving? What is the role of OEMs, and what is the role of like an airline operator? How do we see the difference? How do we understand that here is an OEM role and here is an airline role? Michael.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Michael Merritt. I'm the head of commercial for Skyports Drone Services. We're based in the UK and have offices in around 6 countries and operations in around 16 countries. And we see drone deliveries in kind of 4 ways. So the first is maritime and offshore. So we do a lot of deliveries to ships. We do a lot of deliveries to oil rigs and a lot of deliveries to wind farms. Then we have rural, which is some of the work that we're doing with Village Reach. For example, in the DRC, we have a pretty significant network alongside Village Reach delivering medical products, and we do similar work for ministries of health around the world. And then we look at your kind of same day and next day shipping, kind of regional air cargo networks. And then there's a kind of general logistics element. So for example, everyday mail and that sort of thing. So that's how we see it. And then your kind of second part of the question was OEMs versus operators, or OEMs versus drone airlines. So an OEM is a manufacturer of aircraft. This is a very, very fast growing industry, and it's a little bit like iPhones. They're pretty useless after about 2 years, and something new and shiny comes along that we need to use. So we, as an operator, we take the very best of the technology that might apply to some of these use cases, and we use it for that specific job. The difference between an operator and an OEM is the OEM will make that equipment. So we, as an airline, like an Air France or a British Airways, will lease or purchase that equipment and use it for that specific job at that specific time.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we'll go to Robert van Derger. Robert, we want to hear similar, so he comes from Oximio in Kenya. Similar question to you, Rob. Are you exploring the use of drones in your business? So, but before that, give us a little bit more sense of what Oximio is. How does drone pilots or things you're trying fit in?
Yeah, thank you. Rob Vanderberg, live in South Africa. It's Rob van der Berg. So I'm here. Our core business, it's clinical research, clinical trial logistics. And our core business is to store and distribute clinical trial medicine. Not booze and cigarettes like other people around here, but it's highly regulated, as you can imagine. We're a global company. We manage about 2,000 clinical trials at any one time globally. We have 10 own warehouses across the globe, and we have partner depots across all continents where we cover every single corner of the globe. Africa, 54 countries, 54 regulators, 54 courier companies, it multiplies exponentially as well. South Africa, and Shamit, remember, Kenya, our place is squeaky clean, it's the best in the business. And also, I've just returned from Nigeria now. We're in the free trade zone. We're also developing a distribution hub. We've reshaped the entire way that clinical trial medicine is moving in Africa. Before, it would be shipped direct to all these countries, cross our fingers, and hopefully it gets to the site. That is why we've developed these hubs to have it in temperature, in time. Another 1 minute. We can virtually guarantee deliveries. And obviously the continuity of a clinical trial. Clinical trials are expensive. Up to $100 million are spent in the first 10 years to get the clinical trial logistics supply chain going. And they only have 5 years to recover those expenses. And if you stuff up the supply chain in it, it's money not well spent. Where we see ourselves in the drone industry is not delivering clinical trial medicine to the sites, the clinics, not yet, unless it's verified, validated by QA departments, etc. But reverse logistics is getting the biospecimens back from those sites. Be pandemic ready. COVID taught us a lot of things. So our company is committed and dedicated to work with these dudes in getting the drones into clinical trial supply chain as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And I think the logistics industry is not about keeping judgments and moral judgments about if it's someone who wants a fancy cigar in the middle of a safari park and is willing to give a couple of $100s, I will use that money to cross-subsidize the logistic delivery to some other socially beneficial delivery. So it's not a matter of, like, we worry about the fact that we are delivering cigarettes or cigars. But the important point in this is clinical trials where responsiveness and timeliness matters more than anything else. One site with enrolled patients, one fallout can lead to significant adverse impact on the trial itself. So that should be a perfect use case. I understand you're using it for the reverse, but I think my next question to you when I come back will be, what's preventing from using it, besides what you said, QA and validation? What's preventing from delivering clinical supply material? So, Shamit Shah, he's the head of Freight and Time, East Africa. Shamit, introduce.
Can you hear me?
I think people may know Freight and Time, but I think it will nevertheless be good you tell about your business and then tell us, are you starting to do something with drones?
So, happy to be here. I'm Shamit. I'm the CEO of Freight and Time. We're a local and regional logistics company across 9 countries in East Africa. We started out very much in the commercial side of the business and have sort of ended up doing a lot of the humanitarian stuff. And now, recently, we have concluded the first successful pilot of drones in Ethiopia. So, apart from all the people here, we're actually doing this. And I want to call somebody out, Craig, over there, who was incredibly instrumental in this. He's ex-UPS. And so for me, drones are actually a part of the solution. They're not the solution. And as long as you make it part of a solution, in the right place, at the right time, for the right problem, it works. You can't just go and say one size fits everything. And so that's where we've seen that using drones in Ethiopia to deliver, and it was incredible, by the way, because who could imagine in a war-torn country we would get approval to fly drones? And we did. It took us 12 months. We brought in Swoop Aero, and we did a pilot, and it was incredibly successful because Africa is the right place for drones. We don't have infrastructure. It's tough to get to a lot of places. You have problems with weather. You have, everything you can imagine. And blood-saving, drones sending blood to maternity, you're sending vaccines, you can do reverse logistics. It is the solution. But it's only part of the solution.
And I will come back to you, Shamit, asking what specifically is being transported in Ethiopia. And then the question will be, why, if it is only a specific part of your business, why not in others? So why is it that the fresh food business is not using it, or the medicines one, or vice versa? So that will be my next question, just preemptively giving you all time to think and reflect. Next, I have Kirsten de Haven. She works for Project Last Mile. Kirsten, tell us about your project, which I think many people know, but nevertheless, a reminder. And how does the Project Last Mile think about use of drones? Is it mainstream? Shall we be using it for all last mile applications? Is it only in specific cases? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, just as a reminder, well, I'm Kirsten DeHaven, and Project Last Mile is a partnership between Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola Foundation, Gates Foundation, PEPFAR, USAID, and we take a lot of the technical expertise from the Coca-Cola system and try to apply it to supply chain. So we work with both the public health sector and then increasingly, the local private sector companies as well, and try to provide them that technical support. The whole question that we ask ourselves is, if you can get a cold Coca-Cola anywhere, why can't you get essential medicines? So why we haven't worked directly in drones yet, because we are kind of guided by the motivations and ones from the public sector and then also these private sector companies, we are witnessing an increasingly amount of drone projects going on and trying to think, how do we bring in some of those Coke best practices and some of that route to market optimization and some of this differentiated service delivery practices onto these projects with drones. So I think it's an interesting moment as we start to see more cost efficiency with drones and what the next steps are. I think PLM will probably be increasingly involved.
Super, great to hear that. So I think we heard the word cost effectiveness mentioned by Kirsten. Olivier talked about it. Some others, I think Emmer said, when it becomes cost effective. So it begs the question, what does it mean to say drones are now a cost effective means of transport? What is the benchmark comparison? And that raises lots of very hairy questions that come up, such as, does it really have to meet the conventional per kilometer price or cost of mainstream transport? Olivier started by showing it's a green means of transport, so maybe we are leapfrogging to a green transport option, which means maybe we should think about cost effectiveness differently. The second thing that's embedded in this is, in many instances, the responsiveness and timeliness is much higher using a drone transport model than using mainstream transport model. So are we willing to pay a premium for timeliness and faster delivery? If yes, how much is that premium? How much have we paid in other instances where timeliness and responsiveness mattered a lot? So those are some other questions that Olivier and this project he described are starting to get into. But before I go back to the panelists, let me go to Olivier first and ask, you described the market development concept. We've talked about this a few times. Why isn't it progressing? There are people here who say, we're willing to try, we are already trying, we're already using it, we will be the enabling group if it comes together, right? Those are the kinds of responses, or specific use cases, clinical trial, reverse logistics, port surveillance. Why is it moving forward?
So, over the last about couple years, I actually did a lot of research, a lot of interviews with the private sector, within health, public, private, and so on. And like you said, the interest is there, but the risk is still perceived as too big. It's a new technology. So one company will difficultly make the commitment and the investment needed, just that company alone. They are willing to come up as a coalition or as develop a coalition of partners that include public, private, donors, and so on, to actually develop and test the integration of drone into commercial use and apply market-driven pricing strategy for the benefit of public health. It's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. You need scale, you need volume, but to get there, you need the right price. and to the right price, that's what's going to help you get scale and so on. And so I think it's not a one company. I think we're still at the R&D, but from the market. We need to develop, test, shape the market. More and more the use cases in the commercial sector are shaping up. Now it's time to come together and contribute into the testing, the development of the market, and the shaping it.
Okay, so we are stuck in this circular reference problem where unless price comes down, volume doesn't go up. Unless volume goes up, price doesn't come down. And what we're attempting to talk about here is, can we get the system out of that lower level equilibrium into a higher level equilibrium, and how? So but before I go to Anthony, you use it for warehouse stock counting, but not for small parcel delivery. Is there cost economics that works against using in parcel delivery? Is it something else that comes in the way? Given that you are starting to use the technology to do stock counting, why not use it for other things in your business?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is that we already have quite an extensive network that does last mile deliveries. So we've got well over 1,000 vehicles that are running in South Africa at any one time. And we already deliver critical medicines out to rural areas. We also deliver school books. So we have a certain economies of scale where those vehicles are actually economically viable to go to those areas. And so now you're adopting a drone where you're able to deliver a small parcel, 500 kilos is a small parcel, on a single delivery out when we're able to do milk runs around the country or into regions. So that's one of the barriers for us. So we are looking for specific use cases where a customer says, I have a need that road or other modes won't support it. And then we look for an ability to scale that. Because obviously as a global organization, if we want to invest in the technology, then we need to make sure that it's applicable around the world. So it's not an easy thing. It's got to be scalable that we look for.
Okay, super. Thank you, Anthony. Emer, you described many potential use cases, many areas where you said they could potentially be used. Are some of them you're trying, and the ones that you feel are the top priorities for DP World? What's coming in the way?
I always just really thought of drones with medical, to be honest. And it was when this discussion came about that I was actually in Namibia and I was talking to another DP World company there, and I was like, wow, this talk or this show, the presentation that Olivia had shown me, it started to spark ideas in my head. And I was like, well, the geography is going to be a thing that actually plays in this. So typically we look at things as a rate per ton when we do things in distribution. So you typically cross-border going to get a 39,000 ton payload, and you're going to, depending where you go, you calculate that back to rate per ton. But the tonnage or the weight in this is compromised because of the technology. But then it becomes a time of essence question as well. If you can get the right turns in a day, I'm imagining, you could then maybe bring down that cost factor. So it's finding a network that is playable to make it more economical. And that's really what you have to do your sums with, because our customers are looking for a cost-effective network. It's not always about getting medicine. It's about other commodities as well. So I know most of this is around medical things, but our world isn't just about medicine. It's also about eating, clothing, equipment, and things like that. And they are very price dependent. And the logistics supply chain needs to be economical to make it sustainable.
Okay, fantastic. So clear message for other sectors, but more price sensitive. We need to bring costs to a level that it becomes more attractive. For those other sectors, medical logistics, probably because of the responsiveness, timeliness needs, is willing to pay a premium sometimes. These are projects, not routine operations and so on. Michael, tell us about the cost economics of drones and why an operator can manage that better, both the technology uncertainty, being an operator versus an OEM provider, but also we oftentimes make comparison to airlines or to the routine truck use, right, where the combination of fixed cost to variable costs or capital expenditure to operating expenditure, those ratios are very different, presumably for drones. So tell us a little bit more about how you as Skyport see the cost economics in terms of fixed cost, variable cost, which part is changing, which part will come down if you do a slightly different model.
Yeah, I think the first thing, it might just be good to explain like what makes a good drone network. So there's three things to that. So the first is, as you say, clothing is something that can be carried on a truck. It's something that is a cheap commodity that does not need a fantastic aerial solution. It just doesn't require that. We don't need exquisite solutions for basic problems. The sectors that we target is, if you're in healthcare and it's complex, not simple, it's complex, you have complex geography and it's costing you, significant amounts of money to move commodities from A to B, or if you're in offshore and for every minute of downtime, that asset is losing millions of dollars. Or if you're on a vessel, like in Singapore, for example, we deliver $50,000 in cash to pay the staff on the ships. That is something that normally costs, I think it's around $5,000 or something to get that service, and we charge about $150 to do that service. So the first thing is picking the right use case. Does it make sense? We don't want to be delivering eggs in the middle of Cape Town. It's quite clearly well connected. The second is, and others in the drone industry believe otherwise, but so we want to deliver the right things in the right place. And then we want to have good utilization. So in the airline world, with the wide-body aircraft, that you might have flown long distance on, it's traditional that if you're not flying those for 16 hours out of 24, you are not a profitable business, and the same is true in the drone industry. If you're not doing multiple turns on the aircraft, it's not profitable. And the last is automation. These aircraft, depending on the regulatory approvals, depending on the environment, you are able to fly multiple drones flown by a single pilot. So multiple pieces of technology, but done by one person. So today, we've seen 4-to-1, we've seen 2-to-1, up to 5-to-1. So 5 drones operated by one pilot. Now, this drastically reduces the cost, and the cost at scale means that we can shrink down, and if you kind of extrapolate into the future, that is just the costs of the assets themselves, which drastically reduces the cost. So I don't think we have too much time. So just those three things I think are the most important for what makes a good network. What it is that you're carrying and where it is, whether or not you have good asset utilization, and whether or not you're able to leverage automation.
Thank you. Super, Michael. Rob, why not do forward logistics? Understanding the QA and validation barriers, we'll overcome them, we'll keep making the case, but is there an economic model that is ready to go?
Yeah, validation is obviously vital to clinical trial. We must remember our medicine is under test. We don't know what's going to happen to it if it goes out of temperature. Typically, the validated shippers will only retain temperature for between 72 to 96 hours. So there's not a lot of time to get it through customs, delivery, and last mile delivery, etc. So with your funders, your sponsors, your biotech companies, we need to give them the assurance or reassurance that we're in charge. When I bring it or take it to the investigator or the clinic that is testing the material, I'm still responsible. Whoever's in the middle, it doesn't matter. I'm still responsible to the last mile as well. So hence, we going the other way around, baby steps, as we call it, is doing the biospecimen collection. It's less risk on the clinical trial because they take multiple samples. So there'll be one at the site, one repository, and one in transit. Case study, we're doing a study on 35,000 patients at the moment, a TB study in Kenya, 9 provinces, daily exports or daily collections, daily exports to Pretoria. Export permits take 7 to 14 days. We've gone to PPB, Poisons Board. They're allowing us to do immediate exports, customs clearance, obviously freight time, etc. So the 72 to 96 hours is something that can be achievable. We have that in place already with traditional courier with the vehicles in Kenya. Not a problem. But if I can save 24 hours, I can de-risk the entire supply chain. Remember, it's $100 million that they're spending on a clinical trial. So I need to put that in place to give them the assurance that even reverse logistics can be switched around to also deliver to sites as well. Thank you.
Great. We will keep looking to hear more as we progress and see where you take this. Yep. So, Shamit, which businesses in Ethiopia, why not other businesses besides the one in Ethiopia?
You can't push water uphill, right? And so Ethiopia is going to be a huge success story. I predict that. We've done our pilot. We're looking to expand that. And the government has bought into the story. They want to expand this across the entire country. They want to set up an assembly plant in Addis to manufacture drones. But I want to point out actually an incredible success story here in Eswatini that most people don't even know about. That's already doing a full-scale commercial drone deliveries for medicines. So it's got to be the right solution at the right time. You can't force it the other way.
Okay, so Shamit's point is, don't get too embroiled in this idea that we can shape the market, bring new use cases that are not cost effective yet. Let things evolve slowly. It will start to happen. We have to give it its time, which is an important perspective. Also, on the other side, there are people who are impatient and saying, no, we want to get this started, amongst other things, quicker than what will happen on its own. What can we do to accelerate that? That's where the slight tension lies. Kirsten, one additional thing that people will ask is that Project Last Mile talks about Coca-Cola's practices and how to embed them in public sector and healthcare supply chains. So as you think about drones, this will be not something that the Coca-Cola company is doing systematically, but you are getting involved and learning about this. Will there also be a bi-directional knowledge, know-how share, which is the micro distribution centers or other things start using drones because you play that role and take it back to the Coca-Cola company?
I mean, that would be great if we could take that back to Coca-Cola. I think, they're thinking about it more in developed markets when we check in with them, but it'll be interesting to see, will our involvement push a large commercial entity? I don't know, but maybe in a dream scenario. But I think one thing that's important to remember is how can we have an integrated approach across sectors? I think it's great that we're delivering to the public health system and the public health facilities, but a lot of times the main point of care for many patients is pharmacies. And oftentimes, agents are often delivering medicine. So I think we should caution to leapfrog across the greatest resource on this continent, which are people. And there's such a big youth unemployment rate. So how can we lock in with some of these agent networks? How can we create pharmacies and chemists as pickup points? I think it would bring cost effectiveness, and it would also have community buy-in, which I think is really important for a lot of these health programs. So I think at PLM, we try to think about how do we make the most integrated approach so it's very efficient and there's a lot of community buy-in as well.
Thank you. So I want to stress one point, which is she's reminding us that the idea of using drones at the last mile, last mile is, again, a fuzzy word sometimes, but we shouldn't be necessarily trying to replace last mile agent networks. If you look at the use case for a large e-commerce company in Nigeria, it was to bring to the distribution depot from which the last mile agent picks up. So from the national DC to the city DC. So that's not necessarily taking the role of the last mile agent away, which is remarkable, and it also, the kinds of community building things that last mile agents do are beyond just transporting things. That's a useful reminder. We are out of time. I'm going to ask our session chair that we need 5 minutes to pose people or give people the chance to ask a question or two, with your permission.
Oh, sir, they look interested. You're interested in staying 5 minutes. Yes, take it away.
Thank you. All right, questions. So I'll start at the back and then come here. So let me start right at the back. We'll go in that order. If you have a question and if you're directing it to a panelist, please say who you're addressing this question to so that we can be very quick and efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Shamit Shah, in South Africa, the Civil Aviation Authority prohibits us from carrying any medical supplies via drones over 7 kilograms, and if you fly the drone, it has to be 500 meters in sight. So the Civil Aviation Authority actually hostages us from applying drone technology for our medical supply chain. Do you have any advice on how we could uncouple the CAA to actually allow us to garner the benefits from countries such as Namibia, Eswatini, and Malawi?
And so we had, can you imagine how tough it was in Ethiopia, which was under a war, and we had to work with civil aviation, internal security. So you need to have the buy-in from everybody. You need to get them all on board, and in fact, the pilots that do our drones are from INSA in Ethiopia. In Kenya, they've made big changes as well about allowing, out of line of sight. Same thing, you need to go and work with the authorities, but you got to demonstrate the benefit.
Olivier, something very quick to add?
Yeah, very, very quick. So one strategy that we've been using at Village Reach is to bring the civil aviation from South Africa, go see what's happening where it's happening. This is very powerful because they're gonna talk to their counterpart, they're gonna talk the same language, they're gonna understand each other, they're gonna trust each other. They will listen to them, they won't listen to us.
Super, yeah, very good. So we had some more questions. We'll go to Kofi, Jose, and there's somebody at the back. So let's go in that order. Let's make it very quick because Deborah Dull is going to go after us in a few minutes. So Kofi. Where is Deborah?
Thanks, question. I think I love the technology called drones, but I'm a bit skeptical, I must say. The president of my country kind of loves it, but I'm skeptical. I'm looking at it from the system perspective. A couple of panelists talked about the use case. But if we are looking at the health system and looking at the longer-term benefits, what about investing the funds, as Christine said, into alternate routes, using the private sector outlets that are closer for the longer-term benefits, rather than investing in these that sometimes the use cases there? I think the technology is good. We might be able to use it, but I'm skeptical.
Kofi, I don't think this panel can answer your question. I will take that more as a comment. I think most people will agree. We need to find that right specificity, nuance, and preciseness. Jose.
Okay. To save time, I won't ask a question, so something to think about. Thanks. I attended your session this morning about supply chains in flux, and you spoke about something that's changed. We used to think that we could use technology advancements and AI to enhance the execution, the technologies that we use, and not so much in terms of strategy. But things have changed, and you challenged the audience to think about that now we can probably use Gen AI to help us with strategy and not so much in terms of the execution thing. But the point I'm making is that with drones, one of the biggest challenges is just the human interventions with drones. You've got to get someone to send the thing off. You need a pilot. You've got to get someone to receive, turn it around, send it back, all that kind of thing. I think there's a huge opportunity to reduce costs and investment by reducing human intervention. And the last thing I want to say to Shamit, especially I liked, it stood out in my mind, the one thing that he said. Drones are not the solution. Drones will play a niche role. Do you all see that there? Because the road network is so little and waterways are so expensive. In Rwanda, zipline works very well because it's so mountainous in a small country. Mozambique, thanks to Village Reach for testing it so successfully, is a lot of it because of the fragility and the hardship that the country has. So drones are not the solution, but surely they will play a part in the solution.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jose. We'll take one last question. There is, sorry, we won't be able to come to you. We'll go to the lady there behind. Yes. Let her ask and then you come back.
Yes, thank you to the presenters on an informative presentation and discussions. Mine is on the regulatory process. How have you been able to overcome the regulatory requirements in terms of the health products when shipping through health products through? Because obviously it's those issues where the supply chain needs to meet in terms of distribution, those regulatory requirements as far as health products are concerned. Thanks.
Yeah, once again, I don't think our panel can answer that very complex question, which is
and I'm just going to say, let's have coffee, and I can exchange ideas and approach that we used.
There is a lot that needs to happen. Yeah. Shamik, you wanted to say something, Shamik?
So, I mean, a quick answer to all three questions. If you can supply farmer on a motorbike or in a truck, you have a certain convention and you have a SOP. It's the same SOP when you do it by drone. You've got to maintain your temperature, you've got to do a proof of delivery, so it's not that complicated. Yeah. In terms of how hard is it to fly these drones, it's incredibly simple. I was amazed. You have a QR code. You have a QR code the size 1 meter by 1 meter. You press a button, that thing takes off, and off it goes. 200 kilometers later, it finds the QR code and it lands. There's a pilot watching it, but there's nothing. It's fantastic. You unload the package, reload the package, reverse logistics, add a battery. Anybody could do it. You know, my kid could do it. And in terms of cost, at the end of the day, the cost of drones have come down dramatically. So we handle all zip lines, reverse logistics. I know what a zip line drone costs. I'll tell you what a swoop arrow costs is a fraction of that.
Okay, thank you, Shamik. Yeah. With that, Deborah's here to tell us time's up. Sorry, we couldn't get your question. You can ask the panelists after this session. I only want to end by saying, continue watching this space. There will be some interesting things that will keep coming out. This is a fast evolving technology. I am confident that in a year or a couple of years, we will be having a very different discussion on this topic here at SAPEX. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Please remember to rate this session. The feedback is very important for next year's event. Africa Cafe is starting in Hall D very shortly, and we'll have the Rise Against Hunger activity happening during the evening cocktail reception. So please do join us for that, and thank you very much. And they sent Cindy in. Did you see that? They sent Cindy in after me because I let us go long. But thank you very much. Absolutely compelling.